I need to get this off my chest because I've been waiting for this moment for 8 years. I divorced my wife Penelope 8 years ago. We were married for 6 years and her daughter Josie was 10 when we split. Josie's biological father Andrew had been out of the picture since she was a baby. Showed up twice a year if that. Never paid support. When Penelope and I got married, I stepped into that role. Soccer games, homework help, the works. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. Just did what needed doing. The divorce happened because I couldn't have kids. We tried for 3 years, did all the tests, and the problem was mine. Penelope wanted more children, said staying with me meant giving that up. During the divorce, she made it very clear that my relationship with Josie didn't have to end. Said Josie needed stability, that I'd been a good father figure. I found out later it wasn't about Josie's emotional well-being. It was about money. I work in software development. After the divorce, I moved 2 hours away, got a better position, and my salary basically doubled. Penelope knew this because we'd talk about Josie, her grades, activities, what she needed, and what Josie needed always required my wallet. Private math tutoring at 12, $300 monthly, SAT prep at 15, $2,000 for summer intensive, college application consultants, essay coaches, interview prep. Every time Penelope would explain how important it was, how Josie specifically asked if Uncle could help. I paid for all of it. Over 6 years, approximately $43,000. I kept a spreadsheet because I track expenses. Not to ask for it back, just what I do. Last November, Josie applied to Harvard. I covered application fees, test score submissions, interview clothes, essay review services. March 15th, she got accepted. Penelope called that evening crying happy tears, then said the financial aid package wasn't great. Harvard wanted $58,000 for first year after grants. She asked if I'd help. I told her I'd cover the full amount. Penelope got quiet then said she couldn't ask me to do that. I told her she wasn't asking. I was offering. Josie was going to Harvard. Looking back, she didn't sound grateful. She sounded annoyed, like I'd complicated something. The acceptance celebration was the following Saturday at Penelope's house. Family and Josie's close friends. I drove 2 hours back, brought an expensive cake, showed up ready to congratulate her. Andrew was there, Josie's biological father, who'd been absent most of her life, who'd contributed nothing to her success, standing in Penelope's living room like he belonged there. I should have left right then. I congratulated Josie. She thanked me, but her smile was tight. She was already looking past me at her friends. One of her friends, Reginald, asked how I knew Josie. Before I could answer, Josie said I was her mom's ex-husband, not her uncle, not her stepdad, just her mom's ex-husband. Reginald looked confused, asked why her mom's ex was at her party. Josie laughed this weird, uncomfortable laugh, and said I'd helped out with some college stuff, so her mom invited me to be nice. Helped out with some college stuff. 6 years of support, $43,000 in previous expenses, $58,000 committed for Harvard, reduced to that. 20 minutes later, I overheard her talking to those same friends. Reginald was asking about Harvard's cost. Josie said her mom had saved some money, financial aid covered a lot, and her dad was going to help with the rest. Her dad, Andrew. I stayed another hour watching Andrew act like proud father of the year. Watching Josie introduce him to her friends as her dad, watching Penelope not correct any of it. Penelope's sister, June, came up and asked if I was okay. She was the only person who seemed to remember I'd been actually present in Josie's life. I told her I was fine and left. I drove home thinking about that spreadsheet. $43,000 passed, $58,000 committed, probably another $170,000 over the next 3 years, and she'd just erased me completely. I opened my laptop and looked at my bank accounts. I'd already started moving money for the $58,000. August 1st was Harvard's payment deadline, 4.5 months away. That's when I made my first decision. I wasn't going to reach out anymore. If she wanted me involved, she'd have to put in effort. 3 weeks went by. No calls, no texts, nothing. Then Penelope texted. She said Josie wanted to do something special to thank me for all my support, that she was planning a dinner when I had time. She asked when I'd be available to drive down. I read that text 5 times trying to figure out the angle. I scrolled up through my message history with Penelope. The last 3 conversations had all been her asking about money. Josie's senior trip expenses, prom costs, graduation party contributions. I'd said yes every time. The dinner invitation wasn't about gratitude. It was about maintaining access to my wallet. I didn't respond. On Sunday, Josie texted me directly for the first time in 3 weeks. She said she'd been busy with senior year stuff, but really wanted to see me, that the dinner was her idea, that she wanted to properly thank me. She even said she knew she'd been distant and wanted to fix that. I stared at that text for 30 minutes. I'd spent 8 years funding a relationship with someone who saw me as a resource. I told myself I was being generous, but really I'd been buying her affection. I texted back that I was busy with work for the next few weeks, but would let her know when my schedule cleared up. 3 days later, Harvard sent information packets about housing, orientation, and financial requirements. First payment, $58,000, due August 1st. I still hadn't heard from Josie except for that one text. That's when I knew exactly what I needed to do. But I wasn't ready yet because I'd been angry for 8 years. And if I was finally going to act on that anger, I was going to do it right. So a lot of people said I should have seen this coming, that I was being used, that I needed to cut them off. Trust me, I've known for years. But here's the thing. I wasn't just realizing I'd been used. I'd been waiting for the right moment to do something about it. Every dollar I spent was an investment in my eventual revenge. For 8 years, I've been the reliable ATM who never asked questions, never demanded acknowledgement, never created problems. I built that reputation deliberately because when you're planning to pull the rug out from under someone, you need them comfortable first. You need them dependent. April rolled into May. Graduation was coming up, end of May, and suddenly after weeks of minimal contact, I was hearing from Penelope constantly. First text was about graduation announcements. Did I want to be included in Josie's mailing? Said sure. Then the graduation party. Penelope was planning a big celebration. Wanted to make sure I'd be there because Josie specifically asked if I was coming. I told her I'd check my calendar. The texts from Josie started picking up. Photos of her acceptance letter framed on her wall, screenshots of Harvard orientation information, selfies in Harvard merchandise, every message designed to remind me that Harvard was happening, that I was part of this achievement, but none actually said thank you. They were just keeping me engaged. The graduation invitation arrived mid-May. I texted Josie, "Congratulations." She responded immediately asking if I was definitely coming, that it would mean so much to her. I said I wouldn't miss it. Then Penelope called. She said Andrew would be at the party. Hoped we could be adults about it for Josie's sake. I told her I didn't have any problem with Andrew. Why would I? Then she mentioned the party was getting expensive. She wasn't asking for help, she said, but if I wanted to contribute anything toward catering, she'd be grateful. I asked how much she needed. She said $1,500. I told her I'd send it over. The money was in her account within an hour. They'd gotten so comfortable with me saying yes that they didn't even pretend anymore. 2 weeks before graduation, June reached out. Penelope's sister, the only one at the acceptance party who seemed to notice something was off. She wanted to talk. I called her. She said she'd been thinking about how Andrew had shown up and taken credit for everything. She knew I'd been supporting Josie for years, that Penelope had told her about all the tutoring and test prep I'd paid for. I asked her why Andrew was suddenly so involved. June got quiet. Then she said Andrew had gotten remarried 2 years ago, that his new wife was pushing him to be more present in Josie's life. The wife felt guilty about Andrew being an absent father and wanted him to fix that relationship. So he'd started showing up more, acting like he cared, and Josie had eaten it up because she'd always wanted her real dad to want her. June said Penelope was encouraging it because Andrew's wife had money. Not major money, but enough that they were hoping Andrew might help with Harvard expenses. That's why Penelope had been weird when I offered to pay the full first year. My offer had complicated that strategy. I asked June why she was telling me this. She said because I deserved to know the truth. She tried talking to Penelope about how unfair it was to treat me like a checkbook. But Penelope had gotten defensive. Said I'd offered to help, that nobody was forcing me, that I obviously wanted to be involved or I wouldn't keep paying. After that call, I pulled up Instagram. I hadn't checked Josie's profile in months. I scrolled through her recent posts. Harvard acceptance announcement, 300 likes. Andrew had commented, "Congratulations, baby girl, so proud of you." I hadn't even known she'd posted it. Spring break beach photos from March. And then one photo that made me stop scrolling. Josie with Andrew at some restaurant. Just the two of them. Her caption said, "Lunch with Dad, so grateful for this man." Posted in February. Right around when Penelope was asking me to fund essay review services and application materials. I scrolled further. January, basketball game with Andrew. December, Christmas shopping with Andrew and his wife. November, family dinner at Andrew's house. He'd been consistently present for months, building this father-daughter relationship on social media while I was quietly funding her entire college application process. And I wasn't in a single photo, not one. I closed Instagram and opened my spreadsheet. 43,000 in previous expenses. 1,500 just sent for party. 58,000 committed to Harvard. Graduation was in 12 days. 3 days before graduation, Penelope called again. Josie had been asking about the Harvard payment, about when exactly I'd be sending it. Harvard recommended setting up the payment plan sooner rather than later. She asked if I'd already initiated the transfer. I told her I was handling it. She pressed a little, said Josie was getting anxious about finances. I told her everything was fine, that Josie didn't need to worry. Penelope said she really appreciated everything I'd done, that no matter what happened in the past between us, she'd always be grateful I'd been there for her daughter. Past tense. Been there. Like my involvement was already over. I told her I'd see her at graduation. Graduation day was a Friday. Late morning ceremony at the high school, party at Penelope's house starting at 4. I drove down Thursday night, stayed at a hotel. The ceremony itself was fine. Long, boring, usual graduation speeches. I sat in the family section. Andrew was there with his wife. I'd never met her before. Penelope introduced us briefly. Andrew barely acknowledged me. Josie gave a short speech as part of the top 10 students. She thanked her mom for always supporting her dreams. She thanked her teachers. She thanked her friends. She thanked her dad for always believing in her even when things were hard. She didn't thank me. Not even a generic thanks to everyone who helped along the way. After the ceremony, there were photos. Josie with Penelope, Josie with Andrew and his wife, Josie with friends, Josie with June. I took exactly one photo with her, and that was because June specifically asked. Josie's smile was tight and uncomfortable. The party at Penelope's house was crowded, at least 40 people. Catering was actually pretty nice. I paid for good food, decorations everywhere, Harvard colors, a whole table of Josie's awards and photos from throughout high school. Not a single photo included me. Andrew was holding court, telling stories about Josie when she was little, talking about how proud he was, accepting congratulations. And Josie was right there beside him playing devoted daughter. Around 6 in the evening, Josie got up on the back porch and made a speech. She thanked everyone for coming. She thanked her mom for being her rock, her constant support, her best friend. She thanked her dad for coming back into her life and showing her what it meant to have a father who loved her unconditionally. She thanked her friends. She thanked her teachers. Then she said she was so excited to start at Harvard in the fall that she couldn't have done it without the amazing people in her life. And she raised her glass to toast. Everyone cheered. That's when I knew it was time to execute what I'd been planning for 8 years. After that graduation party speech where Josie thanked literally everyone except the person who'd funded her entire path to Harvard, I left. Didn't say goodbye to anyone except June. Just walked out, got in my car, and drove back to my hotel. I sat there for about 2 hours just thinking about the past 8 years. Every payment. Every time Josie had been too busy to call, but never too busy to cash my checks. The acceptance party where she introduced me as her mom's ex-husband. The Instagram post full of Andrew playing proud dad while I paid for everything. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The $58,000 for Harvard was sitting in a separate savings account I'd created specifically for this purpose. I transferred it back to my main checking account. Then I found Harvard's financial aid office contact information and wrote a simple professional email. Said I was the individual who'd committed to sponsoring Josie's first-year expenses, that due to unforeseen circumstances I would no longer be able to fulfill that commitment, and that they should contact the family directly regarding alternative payment arrangements. It was 11:47 p.m. when I hit send. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning, I drove home. Sunday afternoon, I posted on social media. Nothing dramatic, just a simple post saying how proud I was to have been part of Josie's journey to Harvard, how I'd been honored to support her education over the years, and how I wished her all the best. I tagged Josie and Penelope, very professional, very public, very much highlighting that I'd been involved in getting her to Harvard. The post went up around 2 p.m. By 2:45, my phone started ringing. Penelope first. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail asking what my post was about, why I was making it seem like I'd done more than I had. Could I please call back? Because Josie was upset. Then Josie called. Her voicemail was different. She wasn't asking me to call back. She was telling me to take the post down. That I was embarrassing her. That her friends were asking questions she didn't want to answer. At 4:15, texts from Josie started flooding in. She said I had no right to post that I was making it sound like I'd paid for Harvard when I hadn't even sent the money yet. That her friends were confused because she'd told them her dad was helping with college. I responded, told her I'd actually withdrawn my commitment to pay. That I'd notified Harvard's financial aid office and that she and her family would need to make alternative arrangements. The response came back in under 30 seconds. Just what? Then my phone rang. Josie. I answered. She was screaming, asking what I meant. I'd withdrawn the commitment. I'd promised to pay. Harvard was expecting that money. I told her very calmly that I'd realized I was overextending myself financially and needed to prioritize my own future. That I couldn't commit to 4 years of Harvard expenses. She said I'd promised that she'd turned down other schools based on my promise. That she'd already told Harvard the money was coming. I told her I'd sent Harvard an email withdrawing that commitment. I suggested she and her mother contact them Monday morning to discuss payment options. She completely lost it. Started yelling about how I was doing this because of the graduation party, because I was jealous of her relationship with her real dad. She said I was being petty and pathetic, that I was trying to ruin her life because I had nothing else going on in mine. I told her I hoped she figured out the financial situation. Then I ended the call. Within an hour, her Instagram story went up. June screenshotted it and sent it to me. The story was a text post that said, "Some weirdo thinks covering bills makes him my uncle. Imagine being so desperate for family that you fund someone else's kid and then brag about it online." But she didn't stop there. She made a regular post too with her Harvard acceptance letter and a long caption about how some people try to buy their way into your life. How real family doesn't need to be purchased. How grateful she was for her actual parents who loved her unconditionally, not transactionally. Andrew had commented, "Glad everyone finally sees the wannabe father for what he is." Her friends piled on. One said, "Imagine being so sad you have to pay people to pretend to care about you." Another said, "This is actually creepy behavior when you think about it." Penelope texted me around 6 p.m. "You were never family. You were a human ATM who made yourself useful. Now that you're not useful anymore, delete Joss's number and stop trying to insert yourself into her life. This is pathetic." I screenshotted that message, saved it, didn't respond. Monday morning, Andrew's wife called. Said they were trying to figure out the Harvard payment situation. I told her the same thing I'd told Josie. I'd overextended myself financially and needed to withdraw my commitment. She said that wasn't what Josie was saying. Josie was saying I'd promised to pay for all 4 years, that they'd made decisions based on that promise. I told her Josie could interpret it however she wanted, but my decision was final. She got quiet, then said Andrew and Penelope couldn't cover $58,000. They'd been planning on me covering the first year while they figured out loans for remaining years. I told her that sounded like a problem they needed to solve as a family. She said I was being cruel. Asked what I wanted, an apology, public acknowledgement. What would it take for me to honor my commitment? I told her nothing, that this wasn't a negotiation. She hung up. Tuesday morning, I got an email from Penelope. Long email started with saying she understood I was hurt, that she should have encouraged Josie to be more publicly grateful. She said she took responsibility for not teaching Josie to properly appreciate what I'd done. Then it shifted. Said that regardless of hurt feelings, backing out of a financial commitment I'd made was wrong. That Josie had made her college decision based on my promise. She said if I was uncomfortable with how public my support had been, we could arrange for me to be more involved going forward. Josie could call me weekly. They could visit during breaks. She could make sure I was included in family photos and social media posts. Basically offering me exactly what I'd wanted for years, but only now that the money was at risk. I didn't respond. Wednesday, Josie texted different tone. Said she'd been thinking about everything, that maybe she hadn't shown enough appreciation, that she'd been taking my support for granted. She said she'd take down the Instagram post if I wanted, that she'd tell her friends she was wrong. She said Harvard was her dream and she was scared she wouldn't be able to go now, that her mom and dad couldn't come up with the money. I responded, told her the Instagram post didn't matter to me, that I understood she was disappointed, but that my decision was final. She called immediately. This time she was crying, said she was sorry for what she'd posted, that she'd been upset and hadn't meant it, that she'd delete everything, apologize publicly if I wanted. I told her I didn't need her to do any of that. She asked what I did need then, what would make me change my mind. I told her nothing would change my mind. She said I couldn't do this to her, that this was her future, that maybe she hadn't thanked me enough, but did I really want to ruin her life over that? I told her I wasn't ruining her life. I was simply not paying for her education. Those were different things. She got angry again. Said I was punishing her for having a relationship with her real dad, that I was jealous and bitter that I couldn't have my own kids, that she'd never asked me to pay for anything, that I'd offered, that I couldn't take it back now. I ended the call. Friday morning, the deadline for Harvard's early payment discount passed. If they'd paid by that deadline, they'd have saved $3,000. They didn't pay. That's when reality really started setting in for them. The weeks between graduation and August 1st were something I'd been imagining for 8 years. Watching it actually play out was better than I'd expected. June kept me updated on everything happening on their end. She said she felt guilty being my source of information, but also thought I deserved to know what my decision was causing. I told her I appreciated it. Mid-June, Penelope apparently tried to take out a personal loan, got denied. Her credit wasn't great. June said she'd been living paycheck to paycheck for years, using credit cards to cover gaps. The bank wouldn't loan her anywhere near $58,000. Andrew and his wife had a massive fight about whether they should drain their savings to cover it. The wife said absolutely not, that this wasn't their responsibility, that Andrew had barely been in Josie's life until recently. Andrew apparently argued that Josie was his daughter and this was her future. His wife said if he cared so much about her future, where had he been for the past 16 years? They didn't pay. Late June, Josie tried working with Harvard directly. She called them, explained the situation, asked if there were emergency scholarship funds or if they could extend the payment deadline. Harvard told her the aid package they'd offered was final and the payment was due August 1st, no extensions. She asked if she could defer enrollment for a year, reapply for aid, and start the following fall. They said she could defer, but her aid package would be completely reevaluated, and there was no guarantee she'd receive the same amount. She might get more, she might get significantly less. Early July, June told me Penelope had started a fundraising page online, one of those crowdfunding sites where you tell your sob story and ask strangers for money. The campaign said Josie had worked her entire life to get into Harvard, that she'd been accepted to her dream school, but that unexpected financial circumstances meant the family couldn't afford the tuition. They were asking for $58,000. After 3 weeks, they'd raised about $1,200, mostly from relatives and family friends who felt bad. Mid-July, reality really set in. Harvard sent an official notice that if payment wasn't received by August 1st, Josie's enrollment would be canceled. She'd have to reapply as a transfer student if she wanted to attend later. And transfer students receive significantly less financial aid. That's when the real panic started. July 20th, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Andrew. First time he'd ever called me directly in 8 years. He said he'd gotten my number from Penelope, that he wanted to talk man to man. He said he understood there was bad blood between us, that he got why I was upset, but that Josie was an innocent kid who didn't deserve to have her future destroyed because adults couldn't get along. I told him Josie was 18, legally an adult, and had made her own choices about how she treated people who helped her. He said she was still a kid who'd made a mistake, that the Instagram post was stupid teenager stuff, nothing to end her college education over. I asked him why he wasn't paying for Harvard himself since he was her father and everything. He got defensive. Said he'd been honest with Josie about his financial situation, that he'd told her he could help with some expenses but couldn't cover everything, that she'd known from the beginning he wasn't in a position to fund her education. I asked him when he'd had that honest conversation, before or after he spent months taking credit for her success on social media. He said that wasn't fair, that he'd been trying to build a relationship with his daughter, that showing up for her emotionally was just as important as money. I told him that was a beautiful sentiment and I was sure Harvard would accept it as payment. He called me a piece of work. Said I'd spent years using money to manipulate my way into a family that wasn't mine. And now that it hadn't worked out how I wanted, I was punishing a kid for not being grateful enough. I told him he was right that the family wasn't mine, that I'd finally accepted that and that I was no longer interested in funding people who saw me as a pathetic loser trying to buy affection. He said I was proving Josie right about me. I told him, good luck finding $58,000 in the next week and a half. Then I ended the call. July 25th, 1 week before the deadline, Penelope called me. She was crying, actual crying. Said she tried everything, loans, payment plans, family members, fundraising. Nothing had worked. She said she was begging me, literally begging, to reconsider. I asked her if she remembered the text she'd sent me after Josie's Instagram post, the one where she called me a human ATM who was never family. She said she'd been angry, that she'd said things she didn't mean. I told her I thought she'd meant every word, that she'd finally been honest after years of pretending. She said fine. Yes, she'd been using me for money. She admitted it. But did that mean Josie deserved to lose Harvard? Josie hadn't known about the extent of my financial contributions. She thought her mom had been paying for most things. It wasn't her fault. I asked Penelope why Josie thought that. Silence. I asked if Penelope had actively hidden my contributions from Josie, or if she'd just never mentioned them, if she'd let Josie believe all those tutors and test prep courses and application consultants had been paid for by her mother. Penelope said it hadn't seemed important at the time, that Josie didn't need to know the details of who paid for what. I told her it seemed pretty important now. She started crying harder, said she'd made mistakes, that she'd handled things wrong. But please, could we focus on Josie's future instead of the past? I told her no, that the past was exactly what we were dealing with. 8 years have passed and that my decision was final. She called me cruel, vindictive, and pathetic. Then she hung up. August 1st was a Monday. The payment was due by 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Saturday night, July 30th, I turned my phone off. Went to bed early. Sunday morning, I turned it back on at around 11 a.m. 73 missed calls, most from Josie, a bunch from Penelope, several from numbers I didn't recognize, 3 from June. The voicemails had timestamps. The first was from Josie at 2:19 a.m. Sunday morning. She was sobbing, barely coherent. Said Harvard had sent her an email Saturday evening saying that because they hadn't received confirmation of payment or a signed payment plan agreement, they were removing her from enrollment effective immediately, that her acceptance was being rescinded, that she had until Monday at 5 p.m. to either pay the full $58,000 or set up an approved payment plan. But even if she did, there was no guarantee they'd reinstate her enrollment. She was screaming into the phone about how this couldn't be happening, about how I couldn't do this to her. She said her mom couldn't pay. Her dad wouldn't pick up his phone, that she'd tried everyone. She was begging me to please, just this once, help her. She said she was sorry, that she'd been wrong about everything. That she'd take down all the Instagram posts. That she'd tell everyone the truth about how much I'd helped her. That she'd call me every week from Harvard. That she'd visit me during breaks. That she'd do whatever I wanted. The voicemail was 4 minutes long. She cried through most of it. The second voicemail was from Penelope. Time-stamped 3:47 a.m. She wasn't crying anymore. She was angry. Said I'd destroyed her daughter's future out of spite. That Josie would never forget this, that I'd traumatized her. That she hoped I was happy with myself. The third was from Josie again at 4:52 a.m. This one was different. She wasn't crying. She said she'd just gotten off the phone with Harvard's emergency financial aid line. They told her that a payment of $70,000, the original 58 plus penalties and late fees, was needed by Monday at 5 p.m. Or her enrollment was permanently canceled. She'd have to reapply as a new student next year. She said she knew I hated her, that she understood why, but that she was going to lose Harvard over this, that this was her entire future disappearing because she'd been a stupid teenager who didn't understand what I'd done for her. She asked me one more time to help her. Said she'd spend the rest of her life making it up to me if I did. I listened to all 73 voicemails. Most were variations of the same thing. Josie begging, Penelope yelling, a few from Andrew's wife saying this had gone too far. One from a number I didn't recognize. Turned out to be one of Josie's friends who'd somehow gotten my number, telling me I was a terrible person for doing this to someone over hurt feelings. June's messages were different. She just said she hoped I knew what I was doing and that she loved me regardless of what I decided. I didn't call anyone back. I didn't respond to any texts. I spent Sunday doing laundry and meal prep for the week. Monday came, August 1st, deadline day. My phone rang constantly from about noon until 5 p.m. I didn't answer any of the calls. At 5:07 p.m., the calls stopped. At 5:34 p.m., I got a text from Josie. Just one sentence. I hope you're satisfied. That evening, June called. I answered. She said Harvard had officially rescinded Josie's enrollment, that Josie was in her room refusing to come out, that Penelope was threatening to sue me for some kind of promissory fraud, even though they both knew she had no case. That Andrew had apparently broken down crying when his wife told him the enrollment was canceled, which surprised everyone because he'd barely shown emotion about any of this until it was too late. June asked me how I felt. I told her I felt like I'd spent 8 years being treated like an ATM by people who kept me around only as long as I was useful and that I'd finally stopped being useful. She said that was fair. Then she said she hoped I found peace with this decision. I told her I already had, that I'd found peace 8 years ago when I decided this was how it would end if they kept treating me this way. I'd just been waiting for them to prove me right. We talked for a while longer. She said Josie was already looking at state schools where she could start in the spring semester, that Penelope was apparently going to have to get a second job to help cover community college costs while Josie lived at home, that Andrew and his wife were barely speaking, that the whole family was fractured over this. I told June I was sorry she was caught in the middle. She said she wasn't in the middle, she was on my side, and that even though it was hard to watch Josie deal with the consequences, maybe this was what she needed to learn, that actions have outcomes. It's been 3 weeks since the deadline passed. I haven't heard from Josie or Penelope. My number is definitely blocked on both ends now. June sent me a photo last week. Josie had enrolled in the local community college for fall semester. She's living at home. She's apparently planning to transfer somewhere after a year or two, but Harvard is off the table permanently. Andrew and his wife separated. June said the Harvard situation was just the final straw in a marriage that was already struggling. Penelope is working 2 jobs now. One of them is night shifts at a call center. As for me, I've got about $58,000 sitting in my savings account that I'm planning to use for a down payment on a better place. Maybe take a vacation I've been putting off for years. Some people might think I'm a bad person for what I did. That's fine. They're entitled to their opinion. But I spent 8 years being generous and supportive and present, and it got me exactly nothing except a social media post calling me a desperate weirdo. I wasn't trying to teach Josie a lesson. I wasn't trying to be the bigger person or help her grow. I was done being used and I stopped letting it happen.